Hi, and welcome to Formed. I am Dr. Elizabeth Klein. I'm a professor here at the Augustine Institute, and I'm here today with Dr. Carl Vennerstrom, a colleague in academics.
Hello. Glad to be here.
And today we are talking about what I think is the most interesting of the seven deadly sins for application today, because it's not talked about as much. And that's sadness / acedia / sloth. So this sin is called different things. The emphasis is placed slightly differently in different lists. But these are all kind of forms of sadness. So similar to envy, like we talked about last time. But in this case, it's a kind of sadness over your spiritual state. Mm-hmm. So do you want to kind of expand on these three in their tradition? And this one was considered like a very important one, especially for monastics.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. So sadness is in some lists in the exact same place where acedia is. And then acedia is often translated in English as sloth. But I think it's worthwhile calling it acedia because actually, so this is a Greek word, and the Latin authors who are further in this tradition still use the word acedia. They just sort of transliterate it into Latin, even though it's not Latin. So they still think like it's this difficult word to translate, and so it's worth using this kind of funny word, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, these are two different. They're both sadness, but two different kinds of sadness in a sense. So. The first one, just sadness, is sort of grief. Again, we encourage you to be sad about things that are the proper objects of sadness. But considered as a vice or as sin, it would be sadness over an improper object. And so in the early monastic authors, the sort of context for this is that you have a vicious relationship to sort of something you desire or even anger, but you're unable to fulfill that desire. So if you desire some material object, for some reason you're not able to secure it and get the pleasure that would derive from that object, then you're sad. Whereas, in fact, like you should be happy. Technically, it's hard to actually think that, but you should be happy that you were deprived of something that would make you even more vicious, or you're angry and you want to actually like really hurt someone because you're so angry, but something stops you from hurting that person, and then you're sad that you were deprived of this vice. Then you could also be sad in an immoderate way about your own past. So Evagrius and John Cassian talk about demons bringing to your attention these memories of your past sins that have been forgiven and that you've moved beyond. But they like bring you back, and so you sort of nourish this sadness in your heart, and you sort of chew on it, and it dulls your senses and makes you unable to act. So that's one category. Then acedia would be this other category. And in the monastic authors, it's this interesting combination of, like, we've talked sort of about the bodily aspect and then these like feelings and the intellectual aspect. And Evagrius says this demon hits all of those. So it's actually like the worst and most oppressive demon. So it first makes you hate your surroundings. So you hate the passage of time. So you're like, when's it going to be lunch? I hate the way time is passing. I hate the stuff I'm supposed to be doing. And then eventually, like, you hate the space. So, like, these monks are in these cells sort of in the desert. So, like, I hate these walls. I hate that I'm stuck here. I hate that I'm around these people who are now, like, very annoying to me. And so then that's the first part. The second part is desire. So you're discontent, and then you sort of imagine a better world. Like, oh, if I were at this other monastery, all the brothers are like really virtuous there, and they're actually serving God better, and they would help me serve God. And really here, I can't do that as well. Like my spiritual gifts aren't being like used, and I can't serve. And so that's like the desire. And then your mind sort of gives these excuses for why your anger is correct and your desire is correct. So like really, me staying here isn't that important. God can be worshipped anywhere, like he's not a physical body. So it's this whole mind, soul, body, like the whole composite is in this sin. And then what I think is very interesting about it is a result of this can be frenetic activity. So like you're really discontent with everything around you. And so to sort of distract yourself from that sadness about everything, you do a bunch of stuff. And maybe it's good stuff. Like you're serving the poor, you're trying to encourage people, you're visiting people all the time. But all of that is a kind of distraction from this spiritual sadness.
Yeah. So this sin might seem kind of complicated. And this is why it has all these different names. But I think what Carl just said is really helpful in that it's a sadness at unfulfilled desire. And this can go all the way from like unfulfilled desire in kind of like vicious or worldly things all the way to unfulfilled desire in spiritual things.
Yeah.
And when you have that sadness over in this kind of like longing for things that you can't get, it can have like many different effects. So if you're on like the very kind of material level, I was actually using this example right before we were chatting, is the kind of problem of homelessness. And people who are homeless have a kind of despair. And it isn't just that they don't have access to like material things or a hot meal and stuff, especially in Denver. I know that this is like very, very good care for the poor in those regards. But you have a kind of like despair about ever like achieving a kind of life that would be satisfactory. And then the result of that is often like complete inaction. Like, why would I bother to like get clean and get a job? Because then I'll just be in like a stupid apartment all alone and like it's not going to be worth it. And there's no, like, I can't fulfill the desire of a normal life ever again. So like, why even bother? So you can have like a kind of like complete inaction or like sloth because of this sadness. And I think that's like kind of an important like psychology of laziness and even in our own lives. Like, what is it that's causing me to like be inactive?
Yeah.
Is it because like what is the desire that I'm trying to fulfill that I can't get, or like is there some kind of what is the psychology behind my not wanting to do things? Is it because of like something like gluttony, like I'm just want more bodily pleasure and I don't want to do all these hard stuff, or is there a kind of sadness or despair about like what your work is getting you or what you're doing? But then this goes all the way from just like kind of despair about material goods all the way up to despair about spiritual goods. And this is where I think is very important for monks and also very important for people who are practicing Catholics and like trying to make growth in the life of virtue, is that like we see the saints or maybe the person next to us in the pew is like making more progress. And we just, we look at our own situation and we're like, oh, well, if I had a better job at an apostolate with better colleagues, then I would be able to be more virtuous. If I wasn't stuck in Denver as a city, I'm from a small town. If I wasn't in the city with all these people, I'd be like more space to think.
Really not
and like
suited to me.
Yeah, it's not suited to my temperament.
I do want to help. Yeah.
Right. And like this is like such a common temptation where we keep thinking like, if only this one thing in my life were different, if only I was like a little smarter, if only I had one more degree. I don't want one more degree. If only
I were married, maybe.
Yeah, if only I was married. If only I had like my spouse was a little more patient or made a little more money or whatever it is, and then I would like achieve the spiritual thing that I'm trying to do. And so this like inability to get what we want means like we make excuses, we stop doing what we're supposed to be doing and like start frenetic activities. So I think it's like really common, for example, to just try like all these spiritual practices, and we start kind of having like an inordinate desire to like collect, like I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna do this, rather than like sticking to a plan. Or in like worst cases, it could cause us to fall away completely from pursuing the life of virtue and just be like completely inactive.
Yeah, and I think all of this gets to the definition that Thomas Aquinas gives for acedia, which is, again, it's this sadness, but it's sadness about an interior spiritual good. And the way he explains this is that, so it's a good, so why would you be sad about it? And the reason you'd be sad about it is because the realization of that spiritual good involves some kind of suffering or difficulty. And so the association of the two means that when the possibility of the spiritual good is presented to you, your heart sort of drops because
it's too hard or unattainable or
Yeah.
whatever. And so Augustine has
Yeah.
that famous line in the Confessions where he prays, "Lord, make me good, but not yet."
Yeah, exactly.
So
That's actually a really good.
So he has a kind of like,
instance of
you know,
acedia.
a tortured scene about how he wants the good of baptism, but he doesn't want to give up his mistress.
Right.
And so it's like he has a sadness
Yeah.
over knowing what he should do, but not being able to do it.
Yeah, and you can see how like the wandering of the mind over all these things could lead to this, and has a natural pairing with it, because if your mind is not focused on the goods that are possible for you in your current state, but is like stretched out all over the globe in this like infinite possibilities, you can't actually sort of bear up and handle what's in front of you. Because you're not really where you are. You're like, your mind is off in some other possibility. So yeah, it's not just this like laziness of like, oh, I just can't like get myself to, you know, do the thing. It's like, you're not even in the same county. Your brain's completely somewhere else.
It's like this listlessness, and this is like, it manifests in so many different ways. And I just think being able to name it like this is so helpful, because I don't know, I have had this temptation greatly, where I think like, oh, my success in the spiritual life is like just around the corner when this thing in my life changes or that thing in my life changes, rather than focusing on what can actually be done in my spiritual life in the present moment. Because it is like, it's true, for example, that if you have 3 small children, there are certain spiritual practices that like aren't probably going to happen at this moment, like long periods of adoration or something. Like, it would be totally selfish for me to like stay for an hour at adoration at work and not go home and deal with my family. And so that it can be easy to be like, oh, well, I don't have time for anything, or I can't make any progress right now. And to just be like, almost like press pause in your spiritual life, or ignore like the opportunities that God is presenting you with in the present moment. For your spiritual growth.
Yeah, that's good. I think one other aspect that's especially relevant to our current condition is if it involves this kind of like roving of the mind to like some alternative world where everything would be better. We have at our fingertips the possibility to engage that endlessly with the internet. I remember specifically for me when I was a master's student, and I was sort of having some trouble and wondering if graduate school was the right thing, if I really wanted to try to become a theology professor. I spent a ton of time 1 month doing research on post-bac pre-meds, because then I could be like a doctor. So I was just like, all my time, instead of like carefully working through the texts in my classes, or maybe like, you know, having intellectual conversations with friends, it was like trying to decide what the best program to like set me up for medical school was. It was like, because if I was a doctor, you know, then I'd have like money and I can actually help people, and probably this like graduate school thing won't pan out anyways.
Now you're caring for souls.
Yeah, now I'm caring for souls and their bodies. And like everything will work out better.
This like listlessness and like temptation to not be in the present moment, whether for all different kinds of sadness, I think is extremely prevalent.
Yeah.
And
also like your email, like I bet someone needs me to answer an urgent email right now. So I need to put my book down and refresh my email and see if someone needs me. And actually, there's this good description in Evagrius of acedia where it's like you're reading your book, but then you're sort of like counting the pages to the end, and then you're like getting out of your chair and then looking out the window to see if someone's coming to visit you. It's like refresh.
Yeah, it's like this constant like scrolling, this refusal to be attentive to the tasks that you're set on, to your certain life circumstances that you're supposed to be attentive to. And yeah, the one reason I think it's so prevalent today is like, if this is possible for monks who are literally in a cell with a book and nothing else to distract them, then imagine you know,
it's like gasoline.
Working in an office with like endless Wikipedia links to click on and people to see and whatever. And we just really are like, the upshot is like not being diligent, not being attentive to the people who are actually around you, not being responsible for the tasks you're actually given.
And then at the end of like all the scrolling and like looking around in your mind, like wandering to every corner of the world, just like, oh.
Yeah, you feel terrible. You feel terrible because there's nothing out there. that can satisfy you
Yeah.
than other than like sticking to what you're doing already.
Yeah. So the cure for acedia is actually very interesting. The first person to really describe this, being Evagrius, said that the cure for acedia is literally just like stay in your cell. Like sort of, what's the cure? Don't do anything, or just do exactly what you plan to do, no matter how it makes you feel. Like no matter how sad or bored or depressed you are, just do X, Y, Z until you get to the end of X, Y, Z. And there's this great episode in John Cashin, and he describes this monk who's like in his cell and he's like battling with acedia. And he's like, I don't know how to get past this, how to defeat this demon. It's like so hard. And so he jumps out of his cell and goes to his sort of spiritual director, his Abba. And it's like, so what do I do? What do I do? And he's like, you already lost the battle. At least you got out of your cell. But I think actually,
it's like, go back for round 2.
Yeah, go back for round 2. But I think actually it's really applicable because like with the email thing, it's like, how do you stop checking your email? Just feel the desire to check your email and then don't check your email and just like feel the burn, you know? I think that's like really hard, but just be bored and don't resolve the boredom. And actually,
and like don't take the boredom as a sign that you're doing something wrong, because like as we go along these sins, like we're at kind of like the higher sins now. And so when we're talking about acedia, you could see how this is like the very persistent demon that's actually going after the person who has conquered lower vices, who is fasting, who is praying, who is like trying to be more virtuous and trying to like curb their envy. And the demon is telling you like, this isn't worth it. Yeah. You're not in the right place. You're not doing the right thing. Go look out your window. Go check your email. Go like whatever you're doing is not working. You're not happy. You're not really making progress. Like just forget it. And that's a very difficult temptation. I think this is also a very difficult temptation in like marriage problems today, where people wake up one morning and they feel like, this isn't what I signed up for. I don't feel happy when I see this person every morning anymore. Like, this is really hard. Like, I just don't think that this is where I'm supposed to be. And then your mind starts wandering. Like, well, if I was with someone else, or if I didn't have this problem, then I would be happier. And then like that imagination like leads to the breakdown of your current relationships. And it just seems to me that that's like a very prevalent danger, because like once you have everything set up, all you got to do is persevere. But that's what Satan doesn't want you to do. Like you gotta stick to it. You just gotta do the thing. And there are periods of your life where it's just gonna be like, just stay in your cell. Yeah. You just gotta do the thing. You
gotta do the thing. Yeah, and it's I think it's also, as we kind of talked about before, it's also this good indication that you're doing the right thing. That like, oh, okay, I'm bored and I'm finding that I want to like desire all these other things and be like really discontent with things I do have. That's actually maybe sort of like a good sign and a good opportunity to like keep doing it.
Which is funny, where like usually people would see that as the exact like opposite.
Exactly.
Like when I wake up one day and realize like I'm not really happy in my life.
That's when I realized I had to change everything.
Yeah, I had to like change my job and change. Whereas the monks are saying like, no, this is the devil realizing you're actually like on the right track.
Yeah, I'm getting some pushback.
And the only thing he can do is say like, stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because like the other temptations are not working, like to distract you with this or that. So the only temptation that will work would be like, this is a stupid thing that you're doing and you should stop doing it.
Yeah. And this occurs, I think this occurs a lot in the lives of the saints. You hear these stories about a saint who has, worked in a ministry or been a contemplative for a long time and has found like all these joys and kind of work through these various stages, and then at a very advanced sort of spiritual state and virtue, gets these horrific temptations that everything they've done is meaningless and stupid, and
they should
just give it up.
They should just completely fall away. I mean, if you read Mother Teresa's Come Be My Light, she has these very strong temptations of spiritual darkness. I mean, she doesn't really show very many signs of wavering from that commitment, but you can see like the temptation is like you're a hypocrite is a big temptation she has because she doesn't feel the joy anymore. So it's like you're teaching all these other people, you're just a hypocrite. You're like you're it's empty. You're not actually like doing good.
Yeah.
Which like the benefit, I think, like the sort of fruit you can get out of this struggle with the devil is extreme humility.
Yeah.
Because you have a very deep interior sense of like the worthlessness of your own efforts.
And your incapacity to be victorious.
Yeah, and your capacity to kind of like generate your own like spiritual joy or satisfaction from what you're doing, and you really have to rely completely on God.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I mean, as Catholic, it's not like there's some mystery what you have to do in the spiritual life.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like it's like some hidden keys of knowledge. You know, it's like frequent the sacraments, frequently pray, frequently examine your conscience, read the Bible and other spiritual reading.
Yeah.
It's like, that's basically it. There's not like a lot of, you don't have to like invent something new. And I think that can be a temptation, especially when we're feeling like, oh, we're not making progress. Yeah.
And you could see how you'd be led into this too, because since it attacks like the whole person, it's like mind, soul, body. Since like these elements that you've described like are discernible, you can see like these are, you know, the steps, these are things to do, these are things to avoid. You might think that once you sort of get a good understanding of that and even have a kind of habit of it, like I know how it works, and so now I can just put it on kind of autopilot and it will keep working. But you're going to be undermined at like every corner and like from every angle. So you have to be constantly vigilant. There's I had this conversation with a Cistercian monk who recounted going to the infirmary. So these are monks who live cloistered. So they stay at the same monastery their whole life and almost never leave except for like when a parent dies or something like this. And so he went to the infirmary and he was talking to this 90-year-old monk who was like obviously extremely old and had been in the monastery since he was a very young man. And so this priest asked him, so is there anything is there any way I can pray for you? And the old monk says, pray that I would have the virtue of perseverance. And I was like, where are you going to go? Like, how are you going to leave this monastery? But he still felt very keenly that he needed still this gift of perseverance. So yeah, it's a temptation you never get past, no matter how sort of settled you feel or content you feel in your life or in your various duties and responsibilities.
Call no man happy before his death. You got to go right all to the end.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of various forms of sadness. I hope that you are sad and repent of your sins, but that you do not despair of your spiritual progress and pray for the grace of perseverance. We're going to be talking about our last deadly sin next time, which is pride or vainglory, sometimes considered the chief of all sins. So save the best for last. And if you're interested, join us. And if you are even more interested in the 7 deadly sins, you just can't get enough, you should watch Dr. Carl Vennerstrom's short course on the deadly sins where he goes into them in much more depth.